This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, shalom everyone. Bruchim Aboim. How's everybody doing? Freilichen Erev Purim. Yud Beis Adar Haba Aleinu. Tomorrow already is Tainus Esther. And this will be our last shir this week on the Orchos Chaim of the Rosh. There's not going to be a Orchos Chaim shir tomorrow. There will be a shir tomorrow morning at 10:35 on Inyane Purim. You could join us then. We're up to Ois Pei. The last two Oisios were regarding the mitzvah of Tzedaka. In Ois Ayin Ches, the Rosh says, don't close your hand from giving constantly to the Aniyim and to the Avyoinim. However, of utmost importance is not to ignore your own flesh. And then in Ois Ayin Tes, the Rosh said, do not delay to run, to hasten, to prepare the table before them. We brought two examples in Halacha, that by delaying to give to Aniyim, there might be an Isra Bal Ta'acher, by Hilchei Sukkah, where even though the first night of Sukkot, you may have to wait until the rain stops, but not if you have poor people at your table. More important not to violate Bal Ta'acher than to wait until the rain stops. The Mishnah Berurah likewise says that if somebody wants to wait Friday night because they're not hungry, in order to wait to make Kiddush, that if you have guests, you cannot wait because you could be violating Baal Ta'acher. And Rav Sternbuch brought down in a number of his Sfarim that the Chafetz Chaim would not sing Shir Shalom Aleichem when he had guests at home if he felt the guests were hungry. He says, Ki Shemahim Re'ivim, maybe the poor are starving. So until now we're talking about Tzedaka, and now the Rosh continues on the subject of Tzedaka, and this is an appropriate subject to speak about right before Purim. As we know of all the mitzvahs of Purim, the one the Rambam says, Mutav Laharbais, it's better to increase, is more than your Suda, more than Mishlayach Manois, is Matanas Avyonim. In fact, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch writes in a Sefer HaPiryon that the whole reason for the mitzvah of Shalach Manos is to create a setup, to be able to disguise the matanos avyonim so that it should be begeder matan b'seiser yich be'af. And actually, I just thought of a good idea for Purim, so thank you very much. Maybe I'll say it tomorrow night. Look in Ois Pei. Al tisatzel lahavi maaser al beis ha'oitzer. Do not delay, do not be lazy to bring your meiser to the beis ha'oitzer, to the storehouse. The Rosh is talking about, paraphrasing the Pasuk of Malachi, Haviu es kol hamaser el beis ha'oitzer, and the Rosh says this refers to Meiser Ksafim, and this is something the Rosh sort of spoke about in Ois Samach Ches, where the Rosh said, run after Tzedaka, one who runs after Tzedaka, Chesed, will find Chaim, Tzedaka v'chavod, don't give less than a machzas hashekel at one time. And every month and every week, according to your ability, and do not be missing the mitzvah of tzedakah even one day before tefillah, and halavai you should be zoicha to give meiser. Now, the Rosh says, don't be lazy to bring the meiser to the beis ha'otzar. What does it mean, the beis ha'otzar? So, the Rav Goldberg learns it means don't be lazy to give Meiser Ksafim discreetly, secretly. And then he says, Kimatan b'seiser yich ba'af, a secret gift will squelch anger. Which seems to indicate, says Rav Goldberg, that what the Rosh is saying is what do you mean don't be lazy to give Meiser? It should say don't be stingy. Where does the laziness come in? Well, he says sometimes the person is lazy. They just give it to the ani. They could really do it in a more discreet manner. It's just it requires more tircha, and a person doesn't want to be bothered with the extra tircha. So the Rosh is saying, don't be lazy to do it in a secretive way. Now the Gemara in Bava Basra says on Daf Tes Amud Beis that Amar Rabbi Lazar, greater to give tzedakah in secret, it's even greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was worried about Hashem's af. Ki yagarti mibnei ha'afa hachima. And when one gives tzedakah, the pasuk says, Matan b'seisa yichba af. So we see from here that Moshe was afraid of Hashem's af because Klal Yisrael sinned. But if he would have had the zechus of Matan B'Seiser, he would not have been worried. So Tosfos asks, even though Moshe also for sure did Tzedaka B'Seiser, but he says maybe at that moment that zechus had ceased. Now the Rosh says you should hasten to give tzedakah. Don't be lazy from giving meiser. Matan b'seiser yichba af. The Rosh seems to be giving a motivation. You know why you should be energetic to give meiser? Because giving tzedakah secretly will squelch Hashem's anger. So it seems like the Rosh is sort of encouraging us to give tzedakah even with a motive of this way it will protect us from Hashem's anger, because after all the Rosh's derech here is to be mezaris a person beyond what the mitzvah is mezaris a person, even if it's shaloi lishma. Now, we know that in the times of, we know that on the Yom Tov of Purim, one of the most important mitzvahs is the mitzvah of tzedakah, and we'll just end off. The Rambam says a very amazing line. He says, "Ki ein simcha mefayara." There's no greater joy than to be misameach the leiv ha'aniyim v'ha'imlaim v'hanidkaim. In other words, the Rambam seems to be saying the reason why there's such a mitzvah matanas avyonim is because there's a mitzvah to rejoice on Purim. But what's the highest level of rejoicing? What's the highest level of happiness? The highest level of happiness is the happiness of making other people happy. The Aruch HaShulchan also says the reason for Mishlayach Manos is to engender simcha, and the simcha is engendered when you give. So there's a certain level of simcha that a person is encouraged to achieve on Purim. It's not only a simcha of eating meat or drinking wine, but it's a certain spiritual simcha, and that's the simcha of bringing joy to other people. And that is the greatest level of simcha, and the Rambam says by doing so we emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So may Hashem gives us this great opportunity and zechus to be mesameach other yidden, which is ein lecha simcha mefayara. I want to wish everybody a freilich in Purim and bracha v'hatzlacha. We'll see everybody Be'ez Hashem next week on Monday. Purim sameach, kol tov everyone. Bye bye.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.